Scientific research is underway at FGCU's Kimberly's Reef. At least once a month, students and staff from Florida Gulf Coast University dive into the 6 underwater villages of cement culverts. They're investigating the entire water column surrounding the villages, from the current and tides above, the fish life in and around, and the wildlife at the bottom.
One of the most interesting things that we've seen is how fishes are sort of modifying and adding to the reef. So fishes and also stone crabs like to excavate under the reef where it lies on the seafloor, and they've actually kicked the sand and mud away from the reef and exposed the underlying limestone rock, which is almost creating or revealing another reef around the footprint of the artificial reef that we've placed.
In marine terms, the seafloor where the stone crabs reside is called the Benthic zone.
So anyone who studies seagrasses or coral reefs or kelp beds or sponges, they would call themselves a benthic ecologist.
One of the questions I have for Kim's Reef is what's actually in the water that could settle on Kim's Reef, and then if there's things that we can do to facilitate things like corals and sponges or the cool encrusting invertebrates that make coral reefs so exciting, to kind of bring them to Kim's Reef, because theoretically there's no reason they shouldn't be in the water offshore.
We don't have exactly the same types of corals as they have in clear, unpolluted waters of the Keys, but we do have several species of coral that are hardy and can live in our waters.
They build these really nice habitats, and so they would basically facilitate the growth of the artificial reef, making it bigger, and then they act as a primary producer. And so they actually bring in a food source for the reef, and so they can help self-sustain the reef ecosystem.
Corals and other invertebrates like oysters and mussels are also critical because they help filter water. Water quality is one of the reasons that the Water School has received grants from the Environmental Protection Agency and National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
So we're closely monitoring the water quality at every station that we look at the life on the bottom, because we think that water quality, particularly the influences of pollution discharges from the coast, can influence what type of life is able to develop on the bottom.
FGCU's initial research studied how pollution impacts light and oxygen in water. They contrasted 2 offshore areas, one near the Caloosahatchee River, which carries pollutants from Lake Okeechobee and watershed drainage from a large part of Lee County. The second area is further south, offshore of Collier County, and farther from the river's potential influence. Kimberly's Reef lies in between.
Well, we call it the plume of the Caloosahatchee. So basically that polluted water from the estuary doesn't just instantly disperse into the Gulf of Mexico, and it's quite easy to know when you're diving if you're in that plume of estuarine water, because it'll be dark, the water will be green and brown.
The dark water can block light, and so if you have all of these things that are relying on sunlight to grow, having that plume water come over could be potentially detrimental. And so we're just kind of using Kimberly's Reef as a study system to look at the impacts of local issues in terms of water quality on our local ecosystems.
The difference between the 2 sites is dramatic.
So this is a good example of the visual water quality that you see. This is just in the mouth of the Caloosahatchee compared to 33 miles offshore. So this is a great visual of what good water quality does for the things that can grow on the bottom. If it finds hard substrate, if that's available, the water quality is generally good, life will find a way.
But for Dr. Douglas, it's not just the benthic zone in local water that he's troubled by.
Something I'm really concerned about is the mentality of, if something's dirty, you just get it away, send it downstream, send it further out into the ocean. But nothing ever really goes away. The planet is round, right? And so the pollution that we're eager to send down our canals and out to sea, it lingers around in the ocean, and it can still cause harm.
Major support for Kimberly's Reef is provided by Bo Deal and George Gelman, who believe the human spirit is behind every scientific discovery.